Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our panel on pipeline politics as the Prime Minister heads for China. But first, a call for drastic action.
Now, the only people that can help us is the Premier and the government to step up and say, absolutely, this is a problem, and this is what we're going to do to address it.
Alberta physicians are urging the provincial government to declare a state of emergency, opening the door to measures that would bring down hospital wait times. In response, Alberta's minister in charge of hospitals and surgical health services says in a statement the province will continue to monitor system pressures closely, work with health system partners to respond to challenges as they arise. And joining us now, Dr. Raj Sherman, an emergency physician and a former MLA and former leader of the opposition. Dr. Sherman, sir, good to see you. It's been a while. Welcome back.
Thank you, Michael.
What is your frontline perspective on the alarm that physicians are sounding here?
Michael, first of all medical staff are doing heroic work under very difficult circumstances. Once you get into care, the care is actually excellent. The problem is getting in. Now, the ER system crisis is actually a whole healthcare system crisis that surfaces in the ER. This is the worst ER and healthcare system crisis I have seen in 35 years of working in the front lines. When demand overwhelms capacity and ability to provide care, we in the medical world call this a medical disaster. And Edmonton is there now. We serve 2.5 million people in a massively underserviced north, and Calgary is not far behind. Our hospitals have been running at 110% capacity with people in hallways upstairs, and about 25% of those beds are blocked by fragile seniors who simply need home care, rehab care. About a third of them need long-term care. We call these folks ALC, alternate level of care patients. So they block acute care beds, and that leads to almost every ER bed. Almost 100% of ER beds in Edmonton are plugged by sick, admitted patients. We're done with them, but they can't go up. They stay in our department for days, deconditioning by the hour. So the waiting rooms pack with a whole bunch of folks, some minor cases, but a lot of very ill patients, some critically ill. You know what? We've had at least one documented death, and I've heard there were 2 more at the Grey Nuns waiting for care. The whole ambulance fleet gets tied up, and they can't show up for an hour if you call 911. People suffer. So, you know, in a wealthy province, Michael, this is unacceptable.
To what degree, though, Dr. Sherman, is this about respiratory virus season? Because we're in the thick of that now. How much of a finger can point to that as speaking to why the situation is what it is?
Michael, you got to look at the data and the facts. The system has been redlining since February. Since the end of the flu in February, and we have been redlining up until August. That's what the data shows that I shared with you. Yeah, the flu isn't helping. No, not many people are vaccinated, but the system was beyond capacity in August. 10 to 20% of people going to ERs in Edmonton were leaving without being seen, and many of them very ill patients. So the flu is just the straw that breaks the camel's back, but it's not the underlying problem here. It's a system that's been under severe strain for a long time.
Okay, let me read you this. Calls for a state of emergency are misguided and would add nothing to what is already being done. That's a statement that came from the press secretary for Adrienne LaGrange, Minister of Primary and Preventative Health Services. What do you make of how the government is responding?
Michael, a press secretary doesn't know what the heck's going on the front lines. I think it's irresponsible of them to put that statement out. First of all, a medical state of emergency means operational medical command and control of the health system. One leader, with a team, with their team, real authority, 24/7 discharges, rapid movement of these ALC patients to restore the flow so people aren't suffering and dying in waiting rooms. This is not, they are not calling for COVID political states of emergency, which is lockdowns, mandates, and, you know, taking people's freedoms away. That's not what we're calling for. We're calling for a medical state of emergency. But for me, Michael, I don't care what you call it whatever you want. Forget the label. All that we care is the system works and flow is happening.
You recently had a taste of, there's this crossover between your involvement in the health system and then your involvement on a leadership level where the political side is concerned. The Premier appointed you to chair the board for health quality of Alberta. And that's about improving patient safety, right?
Absolutely.
You served 1 year of your 3-year term there, but you only went that 1 year. What did that open your eyes to?
Look, I knew what was going on as a frontline doctor, and I still work in the front lines part-time. When I chaired the Health Quality Council, the independent quality, safety, and data organization, we looked at the data and the facts. The data shows that the system was worsening. Like, it was really bad in February of 2025. I called the Premier. I said, man, we got major problems here, Premier. And that crisis stayed throughout the summer, and our province has grown. People are older and sicker, and then the flu hit. But we were already redlining. So this is not my opinion. It's fact. I warned the Premier back in February and 3 of the health ministers in late summer, saying, we're going to be in major problems. You guys got to get going here, get the hospitals, get the ALC patients out ASAP. So this crisis was predictable and preventable. Solutions exist. What's missing is operational medical execution. And they don't have anybody who understands the system running it right now. It's in the hands of ministers.
What does that say to you then about leadership?
Well,
is that health leadership? Is that political leadership?
You know what? I talked to all my health leader friends. They're sort of lost. There's no leadership. We have 4 ministries running in the health system. For the first time in decades, a premier has taken 100% control of healthcare. The tentacles of politicians are in frontline delivery decision-making. I told the premier, as a premier, with 100% control comes an opportunity to do the right thing and fix it. But if you don't, you know what? Also comes with it a duty of care and responsibility to care for people, and this is going to be on you. There is going to come blame and medical and legal risk. So this is not a time for blame. It's a time to, get things flowing. So politicians got to get their hands out of politics. We need an independent authority run by a healthcare leader who understands how flow happens with their own specialized medical team, flow process engineers, maybe some forensic accountants, to find out where we can deploy the resources to get the flow happening. Hey, engineers could run this health system, and you engineers understand, flow processes.
Okay, put your political hat back on, as well as being a doctor. What's the foundational fix? Who needs to take the reins here?
Well, Michael, first of all, fix is not easy. Took a long time getting here. You can't just blame one premier, one politician for this. It's a national problem, but it's more acute in Alberta. So first, the government has to acknowledge we got a major healthcare access crisis. Okay, right now from them, crickets. They're in denial. They're thinking it's just the flu. Okay? Secondly, we need to activate this emergency authority team led by a medical champion. Dr. Cowell has done this many times. Dr. John Cowell, and he's 82 years old, but he should probably mentor the next person running it. We've done this before. Let's restore flow and delay risks and harm to patients and tragedies like Mr. Sri Kumar and his poor young family that lost a father at such a young age. And then medium, long term, we got to fix the foundation of the system. Number 1, we got to do what the Danish do. Deliver such good home care, long-term care, rehab and transition care, hospice care, that you know what? It's called the home first model of care. Secondly, the Europeans deliver team-based primary care, world-class primary care, and family doctors. 3, prevention. Let's get vaccinated. I'm sorry, it doesn't cause autism, and neither does Tylenol. And let's, have policies on prevention. Most importantly, staffing. We can't do this. We have staff for 4 million people, but not for 5. So let's invest in staffing, retain them, educate them, hire them all. And funding. You got to put healthcare into 3 to 5 year funding cycles. They've been starving healthcare funding because you got to come for population, growth, inflation, aging, and technology.
All right. We've gone way over. Appreciate getting your perspective on this, Dr. Sherman, as always. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Michael. To Albertans, I have a message. This is about patient safety, not politics. I'm a conservative. I ran for the Conservative Party. To the people, to my fellow Albertan, please be patient with us in the front lines. Write to your MLA, all MLAs, and demand better of your elected representatives. To all the staff, thank you for everything that you do. Keep doing it. To all the lawmakers, I am asking for an emergency meeting of the Legislative Assembly. This is a matter of public safety and importance. And finally, to the Premier. Premier, you have the authority, the power. We're not asking you. We're begging you. Please, Let's get this authority up and running, and let's fix this. We can still fix it. It's not too late.
All right, we have to leave it there.
Thank you, Michael.
From the push for a health system state of emergency to pipeline pressures ahead of the Prime Minister leading a delegation to China. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Calgary-based public opinion consultant Janet Brown and Dwayne Bratt, Mount Royal University political scientist. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with Alberta doctors pressuring the provincial government to declare a state of emergency to better deal with hospitals overflowing with patients. Janet, we just heard from Dr. Raj Sherman, and goodness gracious, he had a lot to say on all of this. What do you think Albertans should take away from these latest efforts by doctors to raise a red flag? What weight does this advocacy carry?
Well, as I was listening to Dr. Sherman, I was thinking about my own polling, and we spend a lot of time in Alberta focused on inflation and the economy and those sorts of pressures. But when you ask people what the most important issues facing the province is right now, they're as likely to say crisis in our healthcare system as they are economic concerns. And sometimes that gets forgotten in the whole like Donald Trump, crazy political cycle. So Albertans are very tuned into this issue. They're very concerned about what's happening in our healthcare system, but we're not hearing too much about solutions. So I think Albertans will be very interested in what somebody like Dr. Sherman and his colleagues say about the crisis and how to solve the crisis.
Well, and Dwayne, he turned to the camera, and he had a very direct message to send to the provincial government. So what's to be made of how the Smith government has responded to this point?
They're not going to call an emergency session of the legislature, and I don't think they're going to respond publicly to the calls from Dr. Sherman or Dr. Parks. What the Premier and the health ministers, plural, are going to say is that the government is taking efforts, that this is the point of restructuring Alberta Health Services. This is the point of bringing in private surgical facilities. This is the point of allowing doctors to opt in and out simultaneously in the healthcare system. They are saying they are fundamentally changing healthcare, and it's going to take time to move this aircraft carrier around. It's not easy to do, and I think that's the argument that the provincial government is going to make. But I think Sherman made a very strong point that says they can't use AHS as the whipping boy anymore. The government is in full control of the healthcare system. They have fired CEOs, they have fired boards, they have put mechanisms in the Department of Health. This is the government's responsibility.
Janet, to Dwayne's point, AHS is no longer the overarching health authority in Alberta. How do you see the handling of these latest hospital capacity concerns being reflected in the fact the system is now divided across 4 different entities, 4 different health portfolios?
I think people are just confused. I think if you ask the average Albertan, I don't think they realize, I don't think they could explain the reorganization in healthcare. I don't think they could explain what the 4 silos are. And I don't think they could be clear on how those silos are going to improve things. But as Dwayne said, I mean, the government is making a lot of changes and doing a lot of things. And this is an opportunity for the opposition, the NDP, to own this issue. But, they're focused on some scandals, some spending scandals, but we don't hear a lot about the opposition about whether this new reorganization is going to help the healthcare system or not. So right now, Danielle Smith is just talking about a whole bunch of change. She's pushing that change through, and we're not hearing too much from the NDP. So I think the challenge for the NDP is they're looking like they're defending the status quo, and Albertans do want change. We just don't know if we want the type of change the Premier is proposing.
Dwayne, should Albertans be hearing from political leadership, either from the opposition or maybe more importantly from the Premier herself, from the 4 health ministers?
Oh, absolutely. But I'm not sure what restructuring will do to help people in the emergency department. And that is what Dr. Sherman was talking about was the pressures in emergencies, not access to surgery, not finding a family doctor, wait times in emergency. And we had that horrible death over the holidays of someone dying while waiting for care in a hospital in an emergency room. And I think that's a focusing event where you're not dying at home, you're actually in the hospital where there are doctors who just aren't treating you.
Janet, I'll maybe give you last word on this. What do you make of the political perspective that Raj Sherman brings to this conversation?
Well, I think he's a strong advocate for healthcare. And like I said, healthcare has taken a back seat to sort of the economic crisis that the country's happening, all of the other political chaos. So as I said, healthcare is just as important to Albertans as the economy. And I think it's just really interesting that we finally have some loud voices getting this story back on the agenda.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, Alberta's push for quicker pipeline approval as the Prime Minister prepares to lead a Canadian delegation to China. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. The Prime Minister is heading for China this evening, and he made a stop in BC before heading across the Pacific.
Today's not a day for big announcements. It is a day, as I say, for dialogue, for listening and working. There will be a time for coming back with progress, particularly with respect to conservation.
The PM there, ahead of a meeting with coastal First Nations, a meeting that comes in the wake of Alberta's latest push for quicker project approvals. In a letter to Mark Carney, Danielle Smith calls for a proposed West Coast pipeline to be green-lit within 6 months. Ottawa's Major Projects Office currently aims to complete regulatory reviews within 2 years. A timeline, Smith says, is too long now that the Trump administration has control of Venezuela's oil industry. Duane, I'll start with you first this time. What makes the meeting with coastal First Nations necessary ahead of departing for Beijing?
Well, we don't have a route yet, but I think it's important that the government do outreach to coastal First Nations. Under Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution, there is a duty to consult. This has blocked pipelines in the past. It delayed delayed Trans Mountain. It blocked Northern Gateway. And I think that's the biggest opposition to any new pipeline to BC is not the BC government. It is First Nations, particularly those along the coastline, who are very concerned about releasing the tanker ban.
Janet, to what degree do you see today's meeting reflecting added pressure from the Smith government given geopolitical developments, or is this about setting up for talks in China?
Well, Smith is definitely trying to keep the timeline moving along. She outlined a very aggressive timeline in the memo of understanding, and the premier is committed to keeping to that timeline, if not speeding it up, given the situation in Venezuela. But I think that the Prime Minister was very smart to have made this stop before going to China. He's recognizing the fact that the pipeline, to succeed, it needs consumers for the oil that it's ultimately going to deliver, but also you have to get that product on ships, and that's not going to happen without some agreements with coastal First Nations and with British Columbia. So I think it was the optics. I think if he showed up in China talking to people about exporting this commodity and didn't talk about the people who have concerns here in Canada about the export of that commodity, it could have been very, very difficult for the Prime Minister. So I think it was a smart political move to check in with First Nations before showing up in Beijing.
Duane, how likely is the situation involving Venezuela to reshape the Alberta-Ottawa MOU? Could it be that public dollars are to take on more of a role in backstopping, say, a pipeline to the coast?
Well, a couple things. Let's be clear. Daniel Smith has wanted an additional pipeline to the West Coast for a long period of time. When tariffs came in from the Trump administration, she goes, hey, I've got the answer. The answer is another pipeline. When the U.S. Attacked Venezuela and took control of the oil industry, Daniel Smith said, hey, I got an idea. let's build another pipeline to BC. So whatever the geopolitical economic situation is, Daniel Smith's answer is a pipeline to BC. It is going to take a very long period of time to build up the Venezuelan oil sector after decades of decay. Trump had tried to bully various oil executives in the White House, and Exxon, the largest company in the world, basically said Venezuela is uninvestable right now. So I don't think there's an economic imperative, but there could very well be a political imperative, and that she's just going to put additional pressure on Carney to go forward on this. But I'll also note that while Carney is in Prince Rupert and meeting with coastal chiefs, Smith is now saying there's 3 possible routes, one through Prince Rupert, one through Kitimat, but the other through Burnaby. And is that a realization that a route similar to Trans Mountain is going to be the answer because of potential blockages by coastal First Nations?
Jenna, let's put it back to Mark Carney. What's politically at stake where this trip to China is concerned?
Well, you know, a lot is at stake, and he is trying to manage expectations of this trip very carefully. Canada has been at odds with China for almost a decade. This relationship is not going to just immediately bounce back. But I'm sort of reminded of the adage that my enemy's enemy is my friend. And suddenly, you know, we were at odds with China, but now there's a reason to smooth things over with China. But I think the Prime Minister is keeping expectations low because there is a lot of work to be done, and not a lot is going to happen in one trip. And then he's also got to manage the uncertainty of Trump. How will Trump react to a stronger relationship between Canada and China? So he's got to try and make headway on this trip, but ironically, maybe not too much headway, because he doesn't want to throw things too far off where negotiations with Trump are concerned.
Dwayne, will there need to be deals done in China with this trip? What does Mark Carney need to come back with for it to be considered successful?
Well, I think that the big thing, and one of the reasons that Scott Moe is on the trip with him, is around canola. And the question is, what are the deals going to be to remove the ban on canola to China? Is that going to be about promises of more oil? Is that going to be about relaxing the tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles? There's a lot of challenges here that Carney is facing because the country is divided. There's different provincial interests at play here. You have the threat from the United States, and there's still a lot of anger from China over the seizure of the 2 Michaels. So this is a very high, important meeting, but I don't know what can actually come about from it, given all of the moving parts.
Last 30 seconds to you, Jenna. How closely do you think the Trump administration is paying attention to this one?
You know, they've got many different fronts that they're focused on. And I don't know about Trump himself, but definitely he's got people assigned to the Canadian file. And Trump is always looking for a reason to blow his top. We saw this happen with Doug Ford's Ronald Reagan commercials. So, you know, if Trump's not paying attention today, it'll be brought to his attention. And Mark Carney has to tread carefully. He is balancing many priorities as a prime minister right now.
All right, we're out of time. Have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News about the Prime Minister heading to China for talks as Canada eyes that country as a potential key to reducing U.S. trade reliance. JR says Carney is doing a great job diversifying Canada's trade. Let's go, Mr. Prime Minister. John writes, yeah, why trade with your next-door neighbor when you can ship goods halfway around the world? Liberal logic. Shonzi thinks the world might be a different one by the time Carney gets back. Tricky times to navigate. I hope it goes well for Canada's interest. Have your say. email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow with the petition seeking a referendum on separation, now collecting signatures. What is to come of the voice of First Nations in the conversation? We'll explore that one on Wednesday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone, from all of us at Alberta Primetime. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time.